Okay. So you're with us today for a really important deep dive,
Yeah, if you're at all involved in leading an organization.
especially at that board level.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about cybersecurity, but we're going to try to do it in a way that is not going to
Bore you to tears.
yeah, exactly.
For technical jargon.
No, no, no. This is all about that essential board level understanding.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that we have all these excellent resources from the NCSC.
The National Cybersecurity Center. Yeah, they've put together
They really have.
such a treasure trove of information.
It's amazing.
Everything from, their very concise board toolkit 101
Yeah.
to their comprehensive question set
Right.
and executive summary,
Uh-huh.
all the way up to, their main cybersecurity board toolkit.
Yeah, it is a lot to process.
It is.
And that's kind of what we're here for, right? We're
Yeah.
going to be going through all this information,
Exactly.
really trying to distill it down and pull out, those golden nuggets.
Yeah,
That's going to make you feel like you are so informed and confident
absolutely.
when you're in that boardroom and cybersecurity comes up.
Yeah, and you haven't had to wade through, massive technical manuals
Right.
to
Yeah.
get to that point.
So if you're, headed into a board meeting
Yeah.
or just trying to get a clearer picture of, where your organization's defenses stand.
Yeah. Or if you're just curious
Or just curious.
about this increasingly critical area,
Totally.
we're here to break it down.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Why should cybersecurity be a priority conversation around the board table in the first place?
Well, I think it comes down to good governance.
Yeah.
It's really as simple as that. As the NCSC points out, if the board doesn't have a good grasp of cybersecurity fundamentals, then how can they have confidence in the organization's, overall risk management?
Right. You can't really steer the ship if you don't know all the potential, storms that you might be running into.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about keeping the IT department, happy.
No, not at all.
It's a much bigger issue.
Yeah, the NCSC is really clear about this.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is not just some sort of niche tech problem,
Yeah.
good IT or whatever.
Right.
It is a really foundational element of what they call operational resilience
Yeah.
in this day and age. And you just think about how much of what any organization does relies on digital systems now.
Oh, totally.
It's everything, and so strong cybersecurity is that bedrock that supports all of that activity,
Yeah.
enabling the business to really thrive
Right.
in this digital age.
So when the board is looking at, all the big risks, financial, legal, all that cybersecurity needs to be right up there with them.
Absolutely. The potential impact of a significant cyber incident,
Right.
whether we're talking about financial losses or reputational damage or disruption to operations,
Yeah.
can be as severe as any other types of risk,
Right.
if not more so.
Yeah. And we're living in such an interconnected world now.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It really is a huge threat.
It needs that level of board attention.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the NCSC's 2024 cyber breaches survey shows that
Yeah.
directors are seeing cybersecurity as a higher priority now,
Yes.
which I think is a good sign.
It's really encouraging to see that awareness growing.
Yeah.
However, the survey did also hint at a potential gap between, recognizing the importance and actually really understanding the intricacies.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it did note a lack of understanding or interest in the survey's words when compared to the more immediate concerns of day-to-day operations.
Yeah, you get caught up in the weeds.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
easy to do,
Yeah.
but, it seems like the will is there, but maybe not always that deep engagement
Yeah.
that's needed for really effective oversight.
Makes sense. And, the NCSC brings up a really crucial point that I honestly hadn't thought of too much before, is that
Yeah.
board members themselves
Oh, yeah.
can be prime targets
Yeah.
for cyber attacks. Absolutely. And it's something every board member needs to be aware of.
Yeah.
Because of their access to high value organizational assets,
Right.
both financial and, sensitive information,
Right.
they become attractive targets
Right.
for cyber criminals.
Yeah.
The NCSC specifically warns about things like impersonation attempts.
Oh, yeah.
Where attackers might, craft emails that look like they're from a board member
Oh, wow.
to try and trick employees into taking harmful actions.
Wow.
So it's a direct threat
Yeah.
to those individuals at the top.
That's a really sobering thought.
Yeah.
Okay, so the message is pretty clear. Boards need to be actively engaged
Yeah.
with cybersecurity. So according to the NCSC, what are the key areas that they should be focusing on?
Well, the toolkit really breaks it down into some manageable chunks, I think.
Okay,
So
right.
the first one is cyber strategy.
Okay.
And this isn't some dusty old technical document, that sits on a shelf.
Right.
It's a high-level roadmap that outlines how the organization is going to strengthen its cyber defenses and, importantly, support its overall business objectives.
Yeah.
The ultimate goals here are to reduce the likelihood and impact of cyber incidents,
Mhm.
minimize financial losses, and protect that company's reputation.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are the absolute must-haves for a really solid cyber strategy?
Well, at a minimum, a robust cyber strategy needs to have a few key components.
Okay.
First of all, a well-defined incident response plan.
Great.
Knowing exactly what to do when, not if, a
Yeah.
cyber incident occurs.
Right.
But, just having the plan isn't enough.
Yeah.
The NCSC really emphasizes the importance of regularly exercising those plans.
Okay.
Running simulations to make sure that everyone knows their role under pressure.
Right.
And it also needs to cover, how the organization will detect attacks,
Right.
how it will respond to them effectively, and the process for recovery as well.
Yeah.
And finally, a crucial element is employee cyber awareness training.
Of course. Your people are often the first and most important line of defense.
Totally. That makes perfect sense. So what's the board's role in all this?
Well, the board has a responsibility to make sure that they are receiving regular, clear management information on how that cyber strategy and its associated plans are being put into action.
Okay.
The NCSC recommends that the board should review this information at least once a year
Okay.
to make sure it remains relevant and effective.
Gotcha. So moving on to another area that's probably pretty familiar to most board members,
Yeah.
which is risk management.
Yeah.
How does cybersecurity fit into that established framework?
I mean, it fits seamlessly, really.
Yeah.
And the NCSC stresses that a dedicated cyber risk register is essential.
Okay.
This shouldn't be some separate entity,
Right.
It should be an integral part of the organization's overall risk register.
Uh-huh.
It needs to clearly identify who owns each cyber risk,
Right.
the potential impact, and the process for escalating any issues.
And importantly, this register needs to extend beyond the organization's direct operations
Yeah.
to include the entire extended enterprise.
Oh, wow.
Your subsidiaries,
Right.
your suppliers, and any other third parties you rely on.
Yeah. So it's about seeing how interconnected everything is.
Yes.
And understanding that a vulnerability in a supplier
Yeah,
could be just as damaging as an internal weakness.
precisely. And here's a really interesting point from the NCSC.
Okay.
If the board can easily understand the overarching approach to cybersecurity measures,
Okay.
that in itself is a strong indication that the strategy is well communicated and likely effective.
Oh, that's interesting.
If it's all shrouded in technical jargon that only a specialist understands, that should raise some serious questions.
Totally. If you can't explain it simply, you probably don't understand it well enough yourself.
Exactly.
And cyber risk shouldn't be treated in isolation either.
No, it needs to be woven into all those business decisions.
Yeah, exactly. The board needs to be confident that cyber risk is fully integrated into all levels of business risk assessment
Absolutely.
and decision-making.
Yeah, it shouldn't be an afterthought.
Go.
And furthermore, the board has a vital role in clearly defining the organization's risk appetite
Okay.
when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
What levels and types of cyber risk are acceptable and which are absolutely off limits.
Yeah, that sets those parameters and really guides that security posture.
Exactly.
So when the inevitable happens,
Yeah.
we need to talk about incident response.
Yeah, this is where all that planning and preparation either pays off or falls apart.
Right.
The NCSC emphasizes that having a detailed incident response plan is non-negotiable.
Uh-huh.
But, and this is crucial, the plan needs to be regularly tested.
Yeah.
Thinking about what to do is one thing.
Right.
Actually practicing it through simulations and exercises
Yeah.
is far more effective
Wow.
in making sure everyone knows their roles and can react effectively
Yeah.
under pressure. It's like a fire drill for your digital systems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A board should expect to receive reports on these exercises,
Yeah.
including, what went well, what didn't.
Yeah.
The lessons learned that are driving improvements.
Yeah.
Board members themselves should also have a clear understanding of their own roles.
Uh-huh.
During a significant cyber incident, who do they need to communicate with?
Right.
What high-level decisions might they be called upon to make?
Right. And it's so crucial to foster that culture of learning from incidents,
Yes.
even near misses,
Yeah.
and not pointing fingers,
Absolutely.
assigning blame.
The NCSC strongly advocates for a no-blame culture.
Right.
when it comes to reporting security incidents.
Yeah.
The focus needs to be on understanding the root cause,
Right.
identifying vulnerabilities, and implementing improvements.
Yeah.
And finally, it's essential that cyber incidents are factored into the organization's broader disaster recovery plans.
You know how you get back up and running after a major disruption in their business continuity plans?
Right.
You know how you maintain essential business functions?
Uh-huh.
During an incident, a cyber attack can be just as devastating as a natural disaster.
Totally. Okay, so moving on to a topic that seems to be in the headlines constantly these days.
Yeah.
Supply chain security.
Yeah.
It feels like we're hearing about more and more attacks that originate with a third-party supplier.
You're absolutely right. The NCSC highlights that attacks targeting suppliers
Yeah.
can be just as damaging as direct internal attacks.
Wow.
And unfortunately, this is an area of increasing risk.
Right.
Organizations need to really meticulously map their network of suppliers,
Uh-huh.
understand their dependencies on each one, and conduct thorough due diligence to assess the security posture of those critical third parties.
So it's not enough to just have your own house in order.
No.
You need to be
Yeah.
confident in the security of everybody that you rely on.
Exactly. The NCSC recommends regular reviews of your key suppliers
Uh-huh.
and clearly documented agreements
Okay.
outlining how external parties process your data.
Okay.
The board should have visibility into those critical cybersecurity risks within the supply chain.
Yeah.
And should regularly see reports on how key suppliers are performing
Right.
against agreed upon security standards.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, another really fascinating area that the NCSC emphasizes is cybersecurity culture.
Yeah.
And this isn't about the technology at all.
Not at all.
It's about the human element.
It's about those attitudes and behaviors within the organization.
Yeah.
Exactly. The NCSC underscores that a strong security culture,
Yep.
those shared values and beliefs about the importance of security
Right.
within an organization is absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's people, not just the latest security software, that
Right.
can make or break an organization's defenses.
Totally. And a positive security culture has benefits that go beyond just preventing attacks, too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The NCSC points out that when employees feel a sense of ownership over security,
Yeah.
they're more likely to spot suspicious activity,
Uh-huh.
feel comfortable reporting potential problems,
Yeah.
and are more receptive to security policies.
Right.
It can even contribute to improved overall employee well-being and retention,
Oh, wow.
as people feel like they're working in a secure environment.
So how can the board actively help to cultivate this kind of security-conscious culture?
Well, I think the board needs to lead by example,
Okay.
demonstrating those good security practices in their own behaviors.
Yeah.
They should champion clear and consistent communication about cyber risks and security policies
Uh-huh.
throughout the organization, fostering that no-blame environment where employees feel safe to report incidents without fear of punishment.
Right.
That's crucial for learning and improvement.
Totally.
And when it comes to measuring security, the NCSC suggests shifting the focus towards positive indicators,
Okay.
like the number of phishing emails reported by employees,
Oh, interesting.
rather than solely focusing on failures like how many were clicked.
Right.
This encourages that proactive engagement.
I love that. That's a really cool way to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so next on the list, cybersecurity expertise. This has got to be a growing challenge for so many organizations right now.
It is, that demand for skilled cybersecurity professionals is really outpacing supply at the moment.
Yeah.
The NCSC highlights the critical need for strategic workforce planning
Okay.
to address this gap,
Yeah.
both through recruitment and ongoing training.
Right.
HR departments should be prepared to report to the board on the organization's cybersecurity skills gaps and the specific plans in place to bridge those gaps.
So the board's role here is to provide the necessary support and resources.
Absolutely. The board should champion the growth of cybersecurity expertise within the organization
Uh-huh.
through adequate investment in training programs
Yeah.
and by allocating, sufficient resources to build those strong security teams.
Yeah.
Regular reviews of the organization's cyber skills
Uh-huh.
are also essential to ensure they remain current with that evolving threat landscape.
Right.
And importantly, the board itself needs to possess sufficient cyber literacy
Okay.
to make informed strategic decisions.
Yeah.
And this might involve bringing in external specialists to advise the board directly.
Okay, so kind of shifting gears a little bit. The NCSC also emphasizes the importance of identifying critical assets.
Yeah.
What does this mean from a board perspective?
Well, from the board's vantage point,
Yeah.
understanding which technical assets are absolutely fundamental
Yeah.
to achieving the organization's core business objectives.
Mm-hmm.
That's paramount, really.
Okay.
This understanding is the bedrock of effective risk management in the cyber domain,
Okay.
as it allows security efforts to be prioritized and focused on protecting what matters most.
So the board plays a key role in communicating those overarching business objectives to the technical teams.
Absolutely. To ensure that their protection efforts are aligned with the organization's strategic priorities.
Gotcha. So it's about making sure the security team is focused on protecting the things that would cause the most, significant disruption to the business if they were compromised.
Exactly. And the NCSC also emphasizes, the need for a comprehensive and up-to-date inventory of all technical assets, detailing who's responsible for each asset,
Right.
its purpose, and where it resides.
Right.
This foundational knowledge is essential for guiding and informing all cybersecurity efforts.
And to make those efforts truly effective, the board also needs to have a solid grasp of understanding threats.
Absolutely.
This isn't just for the security analysts, though, right?
No, not at all. The NCSC stresses that having a clear understanding of the current threat landscape is crucial for making those informed decisions about security investments and resource allocation.
Okay.
Board members should be able to identify the primary cybersecurity threats that their organization might realistically face.
Right. And understand the broad strategies in place to mitigate those threats.
So it's not about needing to know the intricate details of every malware variant,
No.
but having a general awareness of the major risks and how the organization is addressing them.
Precisely. Threat assessments should involve input from across different business units,
Okay.
not just the IT department,
Right.
to provide that holistic view of potential risks.
Makes sense.
And these assessments should directly inform the organization's understanding of its key cyber risks
Yeah.
and collaboration within the broader sector.
Uh-huh.
For example, through information sharing initiatives like the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Partnership, CISP,
Yeah.
which allows organizations to exchange threat intelligence and best practices.
Right.
That's also a strong indicator of a really proactive approach to cyber resilience.
Makes sense.
The NCSC also suggests that key cybersecurity personnel should actively participate in relevant industry events
Right.
to stay abreast of the latest threats and trends.
Right. Always be learning.
Absolutely.
Okay. So finally, we arrive at implementing effective measures.
Yeah.
So this is where the strategies and plans translate into those tangible security controls.
This is about putting in place, the specific security controls and practices that will demonstrably reduce the likelihood and impact of cyber incidents.
Yeah.
The NCSC emphasizes the importance of a risk-based approach,
Okay.
meaning that the security measures implemented should be directly aligned with the highest priority risks identified.
Right.
They also highlight the value of adopting established security control frameworks,
Okay.
such as the NCSC's own 10 steps to cybersecurity,
Okay.
as well as international standards like ISO IEC 27002
Right.
and the CFF Cyber Assessment Framework.
Okay. And it's not just about relying on a single security tool, but about creating that layered defense.
Absolutely. The concept of defense in depth,
Yeah.
implementing multiple layers of security controls so that if one layer fails,
Right.
others are still in place. That's a fundamental principle.
Makes sense.
Regular reviews and assessments of the organization's overall security posture are also essential to ensure that those implemented measures remain effective.
Yeah.
And when new security measures are introduced, the NCSC points out that they should be clearly linked back to the specific risks they are intended to address and rolled out with appropriate communication and engagement across the workforce.
Okay.
And finally, the board should be receiving clear and relevant security metrics that enable them to make those informed decisions
Right.
about ongoing security investments and strategies.
I feel like we've covered so much,
We have.
which can still feel like a lot.
It is.
For a busy board member, so does the NCSC offer any straightforward indicators that boards could look for to get a quick sense of the organization's cybersecurity health?
Yes, they do. And these are really practical questions for a board to ask. Firstly, has the board received clear communication about the key cybersecurity threats facing the organization? Secondly, can the overall approach to cybersecurity measures
Okay.
be easily explained and understood by the board?
Okay.
Thirdly, is cybersecurity integrated into the priorities of all business units, not just the IT department?
Right.
Fourthly, are the cybersecurity reports presented to the board
Huh.
actually helpful
Yeah.
in supporting strategic decision-making?
Yeah.
Fifthly, do the security metrics focus on measuring successes in security practices as well as failures?
Okay.
And finally, is the performance of critical suppliers against defined security standards regularly measured and reported to the board?
Okay.
If the answers to these questions are largely affirmative,
Yeah.
that's a positive sign.
Those are incredibly useful and actionable points
Yeah.
for any board to consider.
Yeah.
To bring it all together.
Yeah.
This deep dive has really been about providing that foundational understanding of the crucial cybersecurity considerations for board members,
Absolutely.
drawing directly from, the comprehensive guidance of the NCSC.
Exactly. And while we've covered a lot of key areas,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that each of these topics warrants ongoing attention and deeper engagement within any organization,
Right.
Building strong cyber resilience is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
So as you're processing all of this,
Yeah.
here's a final thought for you, our listener.
Okay.
Considering the specific cybersecurity threats that your organization is most likely to encounter,
Yeah.
what is one clear and direct question that you now feel more confident and equipped to ask
Yeah.
in your next relevant meeting?
We encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the information we've shared and identify the aspects that resonate most with your current role and context.
Yeah.
By becoming a more proactive and informed participant in discussions about cybersecurity, you can make a real difference in strengthening your organization's defenses.
Absolutely. And for those of you who want to explore any of these areas in more detail, the full NCSC Board Toolkit and a wealth of other valuable resources are readily available online.
Yes.
And we highly recommend that you take the time to delve a little bit deeper.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.